Hello and welcome to the 6.5 Summit. I'm Fred McClymans of Futurum Research, and on behalf of our team and the team at Moor Insights Strategy, thanks for joining us today. In this fireside chat, part of our 5G and network track, Pat Moorhead of Moor Insights Strategy is joined by Ulf Ewaldsson of T-Mobile. Ulf is the SVP and Chief Network Officer at T-Mobile, and they're going to talk about how the business environment of today is actually shaping the use cases for 5G moving forward. Let's go.
Hello, Ulf. Welcome to the 6.5 Summit. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you very much for having me, and great to be part of the 6.5 Summit.
I know a lot of our viewers out there know who you are, but for those who don't, can you talk about what you do at T-Mobile and your role and maybe where you came from?
Thanks, Pat. I am the Chief Network Officer for T-Mobile. I joined the company in the beginning of last year, actually to be part of both a very exciting merger, as most people know about, but also to be able to build the best 5G network in the world, which we are about to do. I was previously with Ericsson for many, many years, for about 27 years. I was the Chief Strategy Officer and Chief Technology Officer for Ericsson for many years, and also ran radio units as well as the core unit for Ericsson.
Excellent. A lot of great experience, and I'm really appreciating you connecting those mid-bands. It's very exciting. So 2020 was going to be the year of 5G, right? The hype cycle was hitting about as high of a crescendo as you can get. And then COVID-19 hits. How has that impacted your work, and where does the 5G network sit today?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's surprisingly how 5G has not globally been more affected by this. It's a global pandemic. And I mean, even now, we're building towards about 200 million subscribers worldwide at the end of this year on a subscriber base of about 8 billion total subscribers. So about 200 million will have 5G at the end of the year. If you look at how much has happened here, it's of course so that our merger, the day first was in the beginning of April, has been impacted in a way that we can't meet. We're basically working from home and doing this entire merger, as well as launching more 5G sites than ever. You might remember that at the end of last year in November, T-Mobile launched the first nationwide 5G network with about 200 million pops covered. That's the requirement for calling it nationwide. And then what we've been doing this year is just turning up more and more of that mid-band that we got with the merger with Sprint. So during these circumstances, I would say that we've done extremely well. As we said, we hit the ground running. So we've really been able to turn up sites at a formidable speed. We were actually only a few weeks after the launch of this, and after we brought the two companies together, we were able to turn up New York and Philadelphia with that mid-band 5G on top of the already 600 megahertz 5G that we had built nationwide last year.
That's excellent. And I have a special place in my heart for all folks in technology who actually had to go into buildings, had to get on top of buildings, because in your business, people that are behind the keyboard are super important in adding things, but you have real people in buildings working around other people to get this going. And I think everybody appreciates that.
And we took a lot of precautions, Pat, on that note. And we, I mean, most important for us was to keep our employees safe and to be able to keep our crews safe. We are at any given point have hundreds and hundreds of crews nationwide in the U.S. working on upgrading all of our sites. We're actually looking at that. We are hitting paces now that are the highest in the company's history. We are upgrading about 1,000 sites per month on 600, and on top of that, upgrading about 1,000 sites on the mid-band spectrum per month. Which means we're doing more than 500 sites a week with all those crews during the COVID. And, so it has been quite a challenge, but we've worked through procedures, we worked through back office support and everything else for these people to be able to do it.
I think congratulations are in order. I know you're not obviously at the finish line. You're never at the finish line, but to get that far and be that far ahead of, quite frankly, the other carriers is impressive. So we've heard a lot about 5G and how it has the potential to change business outcomes. What trends and by the way, we're going to have a lot of enterprise people are watching right now. What trends are critical to realizing that potential?
Well, first of all, it's amazing to see how, and I was a big evangelist of 5G when I was with Ericsson, traveling around the world, talking about all those remote cars and drones and.
Hey, you did what I used to do, 45 weeks a year in airports. That's the life I used to live pre-COVID.
I recognize that very, very clearly. I was traveling the globe, and as I said, I was part of the very initial group that came up with the ideas. We were a few CTOs, the CTO of Qualcomm at the time, and a few others sat down and said, what is 5G going to be about? And what we decided back then, it was going to be a massive machine type of communication technology. It was going to be a critical machine type communication technology, both for use cases that were that required very, very low battery consumption, a lot of sensors spread out over large areas, really, really good coverage at a very, very low cost. At the same time, we wanted to be able to use it for robotics and be able to use it for something that had very, very high reliabilities. We were talking about the 5 nines reliabilities. We were talking about millisecond delays of just a few milliseconds. All of those very wide span use cases, what it was originally designed for and what we were working with during the whole standardization phase of 5G. Now that we're coming into sort of the launch phase of 5G, and launch is happening even in as late 2018, during last year, as we came out ourselves here at T-Mobile in November with the nationwide coverage. I think what we're seeing is much more trends around back to the devices. Augmented reality and video processing is something that has grown and almost exploded. And I haven't even made the comments I'll tell you about how that is impacted even by the fact that everybody's working from home and so on. But there is so much going on in terms of the investments from terminal manufacturers, from chipset manufacturers, in what the devices can do. So we're back to, I would say, the trend, if you're asking me for one trend, we're back to very high performance smartphones that can have apps and other things that are transforming businesses as we speak. And that's where I think the first starting point is. There is tons of stuff going on IoT as well, but it's still not really affecting 5G. It's more IoT based on the traditional CAT-M or narrowband IoT technologies.
We hear a lot of buzzword. It's like buzzword bingo in 5G and all the Gs. But let me ask you specifically, when it comes to things like mid-band, fixed wireless access, NSA to SA transition, are these things that enterprises can ignore, or are these things that are relevant to enterprises that they should be paying attention to?
Well, if you take a couple of them, if you look at NSA, for example, it was a compromise that was used to launch 5G earlier. It was actually originally designed with something called SA. And what that means is really the core network of 5G. How does that work? How quick is it to respond? How can you secure that high reliability of the network? We have been waiting for SA, and actually, I think we're very aggressively pursuing SA at T-Mobile to be able to get to that core network eventually that will be able to live up to the promise that 5G was promising in terms of robotics and remotes and all of that stuff. So I think eventually that will be more important. Another one that is very often talked about, for example, is edge computing and using edge of the network and things like that. It's not so relevant to actually understand all those technologies. It's more relevant to always be seeking for that high performance. And that's what the promise of 5G is, to get to that high performance. And that's where you can start already now to look in enterprises for what applications could be possible with a network that is very responsive, very, very fast, and has a very, very high reliability.
There are some people I'm sure watching right now that kind of like what they're hearing, right? Low latency, high performance, thinking about how they can enable their salespeople, their workers to be more productive in different ways. And also, when we get out there in the future with things like massive MIMO, when it comes to IoT and even factory of the future type applications, it gets super exciting. But where can enterprises start today? Where should they start to make the most of 5G?
Well, it's interesting because I don't think there is a day without a big event on 5G or a consultant company inviting for a 5G session, or there is. And I've been part of a lot of them because I get invited. But I think I would say to sit down and do the whiteboarding, the strategies, and think about challenges and going through all those processes that are suggested by all those consultant companies could only take you so far. I would say the most important thing is actually to just try it. Just try it. And the good thing, I mean, we at T-Mobile are offering a test drive of 5G if we want.
Nice.
Risk-free demo. You could go in and try it. I mean, it's not until you really hold the device in your hand, you see these speeds, which are peak speeds of over a gigabit, and you have on a handheld device where we have this layered approach where we have launched both 600 and where we launched the 2.5 mid-band spectrum. Those two spectrum assets is what provides that solid foundation for a very good 5G experience. Hold one of those in your hand, you can get to that peak speed. You can have an average speed of 300 to 400 megabits per second. That's when you start to feel, oh, okay, I could use this. And that's when you also can see how many of those coinciding app developments that's going on, particularly those using videos of different kind, using image recognition, augmented reality, all of those things could be very meaningful for many, many enterprises out there. It's only the imagination that really stops us from thinking about how much could be done.
Yeah, even my own personal use case, I haven't had a notebook that didn't have wireless for the last 3 years. Once you try it out, it just blows your mind. And the thought of the higher performance and lower latency on 5G, I cannot wait to get that out there.
Yeah, and remember, Pat, that today the LTE speeds, which we are all used to, all the smartphone, the whole 4G revolution, that is based on a 30 megabits per second experience. And then that's pretty good. I mean, we feel that. So that's awesome. That's fueling a smartphone with enough capacity and enough capability today. These things, we are not tenfolding in one strike when we're launching 5G. So that it's quite a significant improvement that will enable things like, if you look at the Korea launch of 5G, for example, where most of it was coupled with augmented reality experiences, both in sports, but in all kinds of other events. And when you bring that consumerized experience into an enterprise environment, that's when things really can start to happen.
Is there, one thing, right? Viewers want simplification here, particularly if, let's say, they're a business owner, line of business person. Is there a single most useful or, let's say, critical aspect of 5G for enterprises?
I don't think so, really. I mean, if you look back to, and I have been living through all the Gs, actually. I started with 1G, and every one of these has always been with a use case. The 1G was walk and talk. Which was a very cool use case at the time. It was the predictability of that was it was pretty good, but it's always hard. It's easy to make predictions. It's hard to get them right. I think the use case for 5G is really going to be the innovation platform in itself. And the reason I say so is, for example, if you look at 4G, it has been the mother of Uber. It has been the mother of all these apps all that totally new experience that you have with your phone. I think people are opening apps by the seconds on their phones, doing different things, navigating. And you look at banking services, everything, all of that is 4G. Now, if we imagine taking all of that into a 5G environment with the imaging, with the fast responding, with all of that. It's going to open up incredible innovation on top of that universe that already was created by 4G.
Yeah. I'm glad you answered it like that. There's so many people who really try to predict the future, but I think we saw with every G brought something incrementally new and unexpected. If we would have gone back 15 years and we would have talked about an application like TikTok, there's no way we would even thought it would be possible that we would be checking in publicly to places and sharing where we are at the very moment. So
the G's live for 10 years, Pat. I mean, we know that they live a long time. It's enormous amounts of investments that are going into the networks to be able to do this. And once those platforms are starting to emerge and be there, which is exactly the era where we are with 5G now, that innovation power starts to happen. And things comes and goes. And some of these applications will be very, very big.
Yeah, and I have my own biases. I think AR and VR, once it gets to the right size, we're just not even going to believe it. And if I look at the development that's going into the smartphone platform that will make its way to something you might put on your face or be in front of you when you drive, it's going to change. It's going to change everything. Super exciting.
I totally agree. And we are already starting to invest money in edge computing in our network to be able to offload that kind of computing experience that would be there. So I think I totally agree with you. And the network will do part of it, and the devices will do another part of it. And it's that mix of network and device that can never be done by anything else, by a true good 5G network.
So Ulf, I love talking about the future and exciting use cases, but I want to bring us kind of back into the here and now. I'm curious, how has the pandemic changed what's important to enterprises and 5G today, or even has it even?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Pat. It was quite fascinating when the pandemic struck, and I moved into my home here, and we started to work from home. I think just about everybody. We saw big effects on our network. We saw, in fact, a 25% increase in texting. People started to text each other a lot more. We saw a 70% increase in picture sending, people sending pictures. So all of a sudden we needed the communication need translated immediately over to a number of effects on the network. We saw that people started to talk more. There was a big increase in talking wishes, if I put it like that. About 20% increase on call lengths. Number of different things. Mobility went down a bit because people are staying home more. So we saw an 80% increase in staying within one cell, so to say, out of our subscription base. So quite a lot. We also saw how app usage changed. And this can be to your question. If we look at educational apps went up by 150%, for example. Video traffic went up for video games about 50%. We saw, food ordering apps exploded, et cetera, et cetera. So we saw a lot more people relying on doing services from their devices than ever before. I think that trend is not going to go away even if the pandemic problem is solved. I think we're permanently getting a new working environment. I think we're permanently getting a new way of accessing and ordering stuff. I mean, the pandemic in itself has led to an explosion of online services that we're using to a much larger extent. And we see all that on our network. The other thing, Pat, that can be interesting to notice is that tethering has gone up a lot.
Interesting.
And tethering is really, that's when you put your mobile device in your home, you let other devices connect into it. So tethering was almost doubling because people wanted to have extra capability except for the Wi-Fi that they have. So a lot of things, and I think all of those represents opportunities in one way or another for many enterprises to rethink how they can use wireless technology to enhance their product or even launching their products through wireless technology.
I had a lot of enterprises telling me that they were looking for what they considered an extra wireless line or dedicated wireless line for their employees. And because they didn't want to share it with their son or daughter who was playing on the Xbox, and they wanted more of a direct link. So I'm expecting to see a lot more 5G modems put into future specification for notebook use. And even when we do, let's say, have the ability to go back to work, our estimates are that 30% of those are not going to go back, of who weren't working at all from home. And I do think it's a big opportunity for you and others to fulfill that demand.
Yeah, and I think overall, I mean, if we look at how businesses or healthcare and education has changed, I think many of those changes were about to happen. And I think many of the things that, there is some sort of effect from the pandemic was that they're happening a lot faster. And they're happening. We were making predictions that have happened a lot faster with the pandemic than they would have happened otherwise.
Yeah, it's amazing. What sometimes we don't think through is that there was no such thing as govern from home. And there was very little schooling from home. And, here we are. So we're getting short on time here, but I have to ask you this. You're kind of famous in the 5G world. We consider you one of the founders of 5G, and other people do. What is surprising you of where we are right now? You told the story of being on the plane with the chip manufacturers and other folks to get this going.
Well, I think I had probably assumed that there was going to be a lot more momentum in, I would say, businesses that are harder to reach, like the manufacturing and things like that. I think what has surprised me is that we're actually coming back much harder on the consumer play. But there is at the same time one trend that I think everybody had not anticipated enough, was really that the blur borderline between enterprises and what we do at work and what we do at home and what we do privately, that borderline has become even more blurred. And we've talked about the pandemic, and the pandemic in itself has also led to even more blurred borderlines between what is work life and what is private life. So I think what we will see in 5G now happening is that will continue to blur even more. We will see augmented reality, virtual reality apps. As much as investments go in for consumer markets, those investments will continue to benefit, continue to drive a transformation of enterprises and their opportunities even harder in 5G. And we're seeing the trends already. The other one I wanted to mention perhaps last, which is, I'm really a big optimist around this, but I think that 5G somehow is also one of the key technologies to make a more sustainable environment long term. In the COVID, we've been very focused on the pandemic, but if you remember just a year ago, a lot of the debate was about sustainable development and about the possibilities for us to go through with the growth of industries, the growth of economies globally, and still have a planet to live on. And I think there 5G will still play a very, very, very important role. I think that's where we can experience a lot more from home, experience and work in a new way, where our skills and our work hours can be dedicated at solving problems rather than taking a car and driving to an office.
That's really interesting perspective. I've never heard the sustainability piece, but it all makes perfect sense to me. Unfortunately, Ulf, we've reached the end of our time here. I want to thank you for sharing your insights, historical perspective, and I also think that there are businesses out here that would be more excited about 5G coming out than they were coming in.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This is Patrick Moorhead from Moor Insights Strategy, signing off with T-Mobile's Ulf Ewaldsson for the 6.5 Summit. Thank you very much.